Well, hello. Welcome to part two of Art Appreciation History segment on prehistoric art. Where we left off, we were talking about Venus of Willendorf, or we can call her Woman from Willendorf, who I'll review is a small figurine that was found throughout Europe. Let's talk about her a little bit more because notice how she's got this ginormous belly and big breasts. Now again, let me review that she has no face, and she was just, small, 2 to 4 inches tall. They found hundreds of them throughout Europe and Asia. So we think they were some kind of fertility object. You could say a good luck charm. Maybe it was a way to show wealth or something, but there was a bunch of them and they made them, and passed them around widely. And again, we were talking about this bone flute, which is one of the earliest known musical instruments. Although I bet people were hitting sticks on rocks and wood since the very earliest days. Now below we have these 2,000-year-old decoys from Nevada. So that's kind of interesting. They're pretty well done. I actually, to be honest, when I look at this and I read that they were 2,000 years old, I'm suspicious because how could the material have lasted? So let's just say these are modeled after 2,000-year-old decoys from Nevada. Let's talk about Stonehenge next. Stonehenge is such a fascinating story. About 3,000 years ago, as people were settling into agricultural societies in the early Neolithic time, the building of Stonehenge began. Over the next 1,250 years, this mysterious stone circle continued to evolve. The early builders dug through the turf to reveal the chalky white circle below. Okay, now let's go into some statistics because it's amazing. The largest stone weighs over 35 tons, and it came from a quarry 23 miles away. How did they do that? These cross stones, or lintels, as you can see on the right, placed across the top of the stones, were placed 23 feet above the ground and were 15 feet long. There's also these stones called blue stones, and they weigh several tons each, and they came from a mountain range that's 150 miles away. How in the world and why in the world did they build this? We really don't know. But one hint lies in this picture to the right. At the summer solstice, if a person stands exactly in the middle of the circle, the sun will rise directly over the distant stone, visible between the closer stones. So if you look to the right, look in the middle, and see that distant stone, the sun's going to rise directly behind that at summer solstice. Now, there have been some recent findings about Stonehenge that it was a much more developed site than we see today. And the recent findings have really led to the theory that it was an elaborate graveyard of sorts, that it was where important people were buried. But again, we're still learning and figuring that out, and it's just a fascinating subject. Okay, now Stonehenge is made of large stones that are called megaliths. Now megalith, let's get this term into your vocabulary. Big rock, megalith. And it's one example, but that's the same phenomenon, the big rock phenomenon, occurred all over Europe. The ones on the left are called Viking Graves, and they're at Brittany off the coast, like in the far northern coast of France. And there's thousands of them, and they're very mysterious. We don't know why they're there. Now below that we have a couple of ones from Ireland and Scotland, and they're called fairy thrones, which I don't know. Again, we don't know why or how or where. And then above that we have the stone circle at Calendash. Now, again, I kind of just breezed through this remarkable feat of moving these large rocks around without, a crane or a bulldozer or any of the things we would use today. They probably used elaborate pulleys, or they would roll the stones along the ground on logs, but really we don't know. It's very mysterious. Okay, so let's talk about early dwellings where people lived. The early villages in Europe consisted of long timber buildings housing several families each. Now, one thing I find interesting about the design of these is that they're very similar to the longhouses that we see in the Pacific Northwest Indians here in this continent. The pictured here are images from the dwelling at Ska Bray in Scotland. This village was buried under a layer of sand in an early prehistoric storm. Then in 1850 it was unearthed in another storm, and it allows us to glimpse a Neolithic village. They had built-in stone furniture, elaborate storage facilities, and these built-in stone bed platforms. What we see here also is a great example of post and lintel construction. Another example would be Stonehenge, or if you think about how a door frame is constructed. With post and lintel, what we have is, let's see, we have usually 2 posts, but here we have 3, and something going across the top. Let's go back and look at Stonehenge. Post and lintel, 2 posts, stone across the top. So this is also what the Egyptians used to build their temples, and that's something that you will need to remember. So moving on, let's talk a little bit about prehistory in the Mississippi culture, which would be on the North American continent. This is a city called Cahokia, which was located where East St. Louis is today. Maybe some of you have been to East St. Louis there, just across the Mississippi. Well, let's talk about the older East St. Louis because it's pretty amazing. At its peak, Cahokia had from 10 to 20,000 people living within the city walls, and there was about 10,000 more living close by. Over 500 mounds were discovered in this area, plus skeletons, which led us to speculate that the people of Cahokia very likely practiced human sacrifice. Now, in an odd twist, similar to Stonehenge, this city had a circle that aligned with the sun at the summer solstice, made of 48 posts, and the 49th post marked where the place of the sun at summer solstice. This sort of makes sense, as these primitive societies or these prehistoric societies would mark the turn of the year. Now, these circles are called henges. So this is another form of a wooden henge built by the Cahokian people, the people of the city of Cahokia. Now, it peaked about 3,000 years ago. This is much later than the prehistoric cultures of Europe, and yet we find many similarities between these two cultures. I'm going to look at a couple of more things from North America. This is Great Serpent Mound that I just think is amazing. I don't know, maybe some of you guys have been there. It's in Ohio, and here's what you can do is look over here where my little pointer is, and you see stairs. That's how big it is. So this is a very wide road, kind of a road around it. And I like to imagine, we don't know why it was built. It was built around 1000 AD, and the entire community probably joined together to do it. But I think about the primitive tools that they had to build, and it's really amazing. I also like to imagine the early European explorers coming upon this, and maybe they couldn't really get a feeling of it because they were not able to get up and look over the top, but they must have been so amazed by that. So we're going to wind up this little lecture talking about the Hopewell people. And they were one of the most advanced Mississippi cultures. They thrived from about 200 BC to 200 AD, living in the Mississippi Valley. But they were great traders. Within their villages, we found mica from the Appalachian Mountains, copper from Michigan, turtle shells and shark's teeth from Florida. To the left is a soapstone pipe with a beaver decoration, and it just shows the artistry of these people. Now, as we consider both North and South American prehistoric cultures, we could spend an entire chapter just on that. So I'm going to acknowledge here that we're only skimming the surface. We've left out the Plains Indians, the Northwest Indians, all of the tribes in Mexico, Central and South America. So let's just consider it an overview of those cultures, and we'll really, perhaps you will be inspired to do further research, or at least to consider that there was a wealth of culture right here on this continent as we look further at the history of European art. This concludes the slide lecture on prehistoric art, and I just so appreciate your attention and your listening, and we will also align this with the book content, so be sure and read that also. Hey, thanks for listening.